How we doing, folks? My guest today is going to be Doug Foxley. Doug is one of the true power brokers in the state of Utah and has had his lobbying practice since 1978. In 2016, he was the co-chairman of the re-election campaigns of Governor Gary Herbert and Congresswoman Mia Love. He was the senior advisor for the 2012 Orrin Hatch re-election campaign and a senior advisor to the John Huntsman governor campaigns as well. He has served on the Utah State University Board of Trustees and was awarded an honorary doctorate from Utah State in May 2016. Doug is also a passionate traveler who's traveled to over 140 countries. I hope you enjoy Doug's journey of failures and successes along the way.
And we're going. Mr. Foxley, thank you for taking the time, sir. I really appreciate you coming on. I've been looking forward to this for a while.
Well, gee, I'm just honored you'd have me. Thanks, Bobby. I like I said when we were chatting before we started here, hope I have something that might be of interest.
I think you definitely do. You know, you've been a lobbyist in this state for a long time, and it's really a pretty interesting story coming from Tremonton, Utah, which is, I looked at the population today. Today, it's 8,242.
Oh my gosh! You know, somebody must have moved into town. Anyway, we'll send out the welcome wagon.
Exactly. So, how does someone make their way from that tiny little town? I mean, north of Ogden. I mean, it's pretty close to Idaho, right? And find themselves. How does that journey kind of begin? Where's that drive come from?
You know, it's kind of fascinating. It's my wish, not only for you, but literally anybody that's listening or anybody I come in contact with. You know, I consider myself one of the world's luckiest human beings. I found my passion. I found my passion early in life, and I found out a way to make it work. So when I was growing up, my father, who was a kind of a prominent business guy in the small town of Tremonton, was elected to the Utah State Legislature. So as a young guy, we'd go down and make our trek to the big city, and that's kind of where I kind of saw kind of the fun and excitement of the legislature and politics. And I'd go with my dad to various events, and it was just something that excited me. And then I decided when I went to college, I ended up just going over the hill to Logan to Utah State University. And by luck, I took a political science class, and it thrilled me. And I said, well, gee, this is what I want to do. And then that summer, I was invited through one of my father's friends, a former congressman from Utah, a guy that nobody would know, Lawrence Burton, to go back and be literally in the first class of interns in Washington, D.C. And so what a great thrill it was. And while I was there, you know, I ran into these people that were called lobbyists. And I just said, like, gee, you mean I can get my political fix? I can be a vice president of a company. You know, I can eat at really nice restaurants. I can go to play really great golf courses. And, I can go to baseball games and this and that and the other and do all of this. How do I sign up for this deal?
Right.
And what was kind of fun at the time is a guy named Tom Korologos from Utah. He ended up being, they used to call him the 101st Senator. He and Dick Richards, who ended up being the national chairman of the Republican Party under Ronald Reagan, they kind of took me under their wing and just said, well, gee, Doug, if you want to do this, you ought to go get as much school as you can. If you could handle law school, you ought to do it. So that's kind of what I set out to do, all the time thinking that I was going to do what I ended up doing in Washington, D.C.
Right.
But what happened is when I finished college, I was going to go back east to law school, but had a death in the family, so I stayed here. And I went to work, as a very young man. I was kind of the chief deputy in the lieutenant governor's office while I finished law school. And when I graduated, Utah moved to annual sessions of the legislature. And I thought there was a market niche for somebody to kind of engage in the DC style practice of law in Salt Lake City, Utah.
Okay.
Because, that there were a whole bunch of companies and corporations that would need, somebody to represent them, but they weren't, but they wouldn't have, they didn't have the need for somebody full time. So
Okay.
I sat down with a whole bunch of the, major partners of the Salt Lake law firms, and they kind of thought my idea was crazy. And
Mhm.
so I just went
Why?
out because they didn't understand that Utah was moving, that it was transitioning. They thought that the legislature was kind of a backward place, that, it only happened, 45 days a year.
Mhm.
And they just didn't think that, the market was ready for it.
Right. And now what years were this?
So this happened in 1978.
Okay.
Yeah, so long before you were a twinkle in your mother's eye.
Yeah, absolutely. So back to trying to convince those people. I mean, it sounds like early on, though, as you're kind of working your way through, that what was that? Where does that drive come from, though? Is that just from your dad going to some of those rallies and kind of enjoying the political aspect of it, or what I mean, what kind of was it for you that made it such passion?
Well, it's kind of interesting. We all kind of try to figure out where we fit in life. And, I mean, you were the, the excellent skier, and I knew that I was never going to ski in the Winter Olympics. And, I knew I was never going to play. I mean, I played high school football, but I knew I was never big enough to play, the collegiate level. And so it was just one of those things that always fascinated me. I mean, how some kids would look at, how you and your dad and others would look at, tennis players and what was happiness. And for me, it was political races. It was elections. It was election nights. It was, who was serving where, who was doing what. I don't know. It was just like this big fun, political monopoly table that you got to see and experience.
Right. And then you thought to be able to have a little bit of influence there. So take me back, 78, you're starting to come up with this idea, and everyone tells you you're crazy. So does that mean, personally, are you feeling like, all right, I'm probably onto something if no one agrees with me? It probably sounds like it might be a good idea to keep trying.
Oh, I don't know. Sometimes it's just dumb luck,
Mm-hmm.
But I decided that I sit on my own shingle and go practice law.
Mm-hmm.
And then I just, started reaching out to people, seeing if they had any interest in my representing them. I mean, my very first client in this arena was NFIB, National Federation of Independent Business. I mean, they paid me a whole $750 a month.
Okay.
But I thought that was enough. And what happened is I started, we had a Democratic governor at the time. Can you imagine that? A Democratic governor in Utah?
I can definitely not.
Yeah, a great guy, Scott Matheson, Stanford trained lawyer, just a wonderful human being, a great governor. But I became very close to the legislative leadership in the House Republican Party in particular. And the then Speaker of the House was a guy named Jim Hansen. He ended up being elected to Congress, was there for 22 years. And then his majority leader was a guy named Norm Bangerter, and Norm had kind of talked about running for governor. And so in 1984, I ran Norm's campaign.
Okay.
He was elected governor of the state of Utah, the first Republican in 20 years.
And was that your first time running a campaign?
I've been
first
involved,
time kind of going through that process?
I had always been interested and been involved in campaigns.
Okay.
And I'd always had a goal to run a big major campaign.
Right.
And so when one of my pollster buddies, Dan Jones, just said, hey, Norm would like you to do this, I jumped at the chance. And it was fun. I mean, since then I've been involved, kind of either as a senior strategist or chairman of, pretty much every governor's campaign in Utah, almost all of them successful, was kind of the chairman of Orrin Hatch's last campaign, Governor Herbert's last campaign, and on and on and on. And so it's been, being involved in elections has kind of been something I've been passionate about. In fact, my law partner and I, Frank Pignanelli, for the last 13 years, we've taught a campaigns and elections class at the University of Utah, which is one of the most popular, if not the most popular, courses offered at the university. We teach it fall semester, and kids get involved in campaigns. We've made it practical. We've made it hands-on.
Right.
We invite people who are, subject matter experts, whether it's in fundraising, whether it's in strategy, whether it's in, get out the vote, on and on and on. And so that's been a fun experience. So the campaign work, even though it's really been more of a hobby, it's just been something that's always fascinated me.
Right. No, it's just, I mean, it's one of those things, and it's great that you're, I think, spreading some of that awareness. Cause I mean, I look back on like school that I've gone through and everything else, and it's definitely not one of those things like really knowing what a lobbyist is or being able to actually pass that legislation and stuff like that. So to be able to kind of gain and have a little bit more of an understanding, I think especially when you're a younger person, you don't really like want to know the topics. I mean, I feel like it's pretty much like your parents will talk about it every now and again, and that's kind of how most of the households are based off of their parents, political views, right? It's kind of how the kids until they really go off to school, and then they kind of get a little bit of their own idea of some of the issues and start to pay attention a little bit more.
Yeah, obviously, discussions around the dinner table, and which are very important. They shape our initial thinking, and we may stay with that thinking, or we may come to different conclusion than those of our parents.
Sure.
And but really, what I end up doing is I'm a problem solver, and we're kind of at the intersection where public policy, the law, business, and politics kind of all come together. And it's always fun. It's always unique. And you never know, all of a sudden who's going to reach out to you that, has either got a problem or wants to see if they can get something done. I mean,
so,
look, we're all lobbyists, Bobby. You don't realize it. I mean, you lobby Avital, she lobbies you. Your dad tries to do things, this and that, the other. I mean, whether it's the ski team, the Park City ski team, whatever the case may be, your bowling league or your tennis club or whatever the case may be. I mean, we're all lobbyists. The question is, how do we do it? And, can we do it with some finesse? And, do we have a fairly good success record? And anyway.
Right. So being able to be that problem solver, I mean, what are, on a daily basis, how do you kind of prioritize what you need to take care of each day? Like what helps you kind of keep your eye on the prize?
Long years ago, I read a book by a guy named Dr. Maxwell Maltz. It was called Psychocybernetics. And in this book, kind of the gist of the book is if you have a problem or something that needs to be solved, you kind of subject it to your subconscious. And then when you awake in the morning, oftentimes, whether you're exercising or in the shower or whatever, all of a sudden, an answer or a solution will come to you. And so kind of what I do every night is I kind of review in my mind, who has what problems, who has what issues. And then in the morning, after I awake, I'll kind of sit down and say like, okay, for X, what about, we do this, for Y, on and on and on. So in some ways, I mean, I kind of let my mind help me out. And in some ways, I think in both a conscious and subconscious way, it happens. And I don't know if that makes any sense and if it sounds silly, but
no,
for some reason, it seems to work for me.
Right. So how much reading do you get in? I mean, sounds like.
Listen, the only person that may rival me as a reader is your dad. But
I don't know about that.
I'm a dinosaur. I read newspapers. I'm a voracious reader of newspapers. I read the New York Times. I read the Wall Street Journal. I'll go through what's going on. The Boston Herald, LA Times, Washington Post. Read the local newspapers, and I try to get through a book or two, or maybe even 3 a week.
Three books a week?
Well, it depends. I mean,
sure.
If I don't have to color in them,
Yeah.
And look, there's some books that are that are slogs,
right?
But then there are others that are relatively quick reads, and But I'm kind of, I think, a lot like you, and I know your dad's that way. I'm always interested in what others are reading, and kind of if somebody's found something that's interesting.
Sure. I mean, even if you read like a book a week, I mean, I try to get in a book a month. I've been trying to do better,
Which is
especially
good.
doing like
Which
some
is good.
audio books and stuff like that. Cause I feel like sometimes I can't have time to get to everything, but I mean, how do you process that information? Right. Cause I feel like sometimes when you go through and read that book, I know a lot of people just like doze off and they're not getting that information in. I mean, I feel like, can that be hard if you're doing like a book a week to be able to really retain that information?
Well, a lot of it depends on the nature of the book.
Okay.
For instance, yeah, if it's a history or a biography or something,
Hmm.
I mean, there's certain elements that you don't need to remember, but the question is, what factors or what influences or, what critical conclusions, does that individual, come to, or you come to,
Right.
that's beneficial. And to me, that's the most important thing. It isn't whether you remember all the drivel and all the trivia that's, located there within.
Gotcha. So kind of I mean, you've been a part of all those campaigns and we talked a little bit about what that drive is. I mean, who would you say are some of those people that really mentored you and kind of helped you along the way?
Well, it's fascinating. I mean, former U.S. Senator Bob Bennett,
Mhm.
great mentor, great friend. Dick Richards, former Utah lawyer, um, great mentor, great friend. Dan Jones, prominent Utah pollster, great mentor, great friend. Norm Wagner, former governor, great mentor, great friend. A guy named Doug Sontag, former legislator, lobbyist extraordinaire. They kind of took me under their wing,
Okay.
and they taught me a lot. And so really one of the lessons in life, Bobby, that I learned is there were a whole bunch of people who were really good to me that had no reason to be good
Mhm.
to me. So, kind of my life lesson on that is you pay it forward. So, I
Sure.
mean, what I've always tried to do with young men and young women is kind of, be a resource and to mentor. And, I always hire a whole bunch of interns, to work for me. We try to work with them to either get into law school or go to professional school, find them a job.
Right.
And, just because it's not only is it rewarding, but, people have done it to me, and that they will go on and do it for others. And so irrespective whether it's my profession or what you do or others, I just think, you pay things forward.
Right. No, definitely kind of makes sense. It sounds like you've had a lot of help along the way, for sure, to kind of be able to create the path that you've been able to have so far.
Well, people were really nice to just some nerdy kid. What can I say?
Well, I mean, to try to, I mean, when you're in those situations, how do you absorb that kind of information, whether you're trying to pass a new bill or you're having new interactions? I mean, what is that process kind of like when you're trying to really lobby for changes?
Well, so what you do, you go through this exercise, and what you do is, the first question you have to ask yourself, is what someone wants, is it reasonable, and
Okay.
is it doable? And for instance, I mean, I've had people that have wanted to offer me a whole bunch of money to do things that were not doable, and I've told them they weren't doable, and they paid a lot of money to some of my competitors, and found out that they weren't doable.
Right.
I mean, like parimutuel betting or whatever the case may be. So the first question you have to ask yourself, is it doable? And then this next question you have to ask yourself, is this something I'm comfortable in doing?
Mm-hmm.
And I made a decision early on that there were certain things that I wasn't going to do. And so, it makes life a lot easier, because you kind, and then there are other things, I mean, you don't really care about one way or the other.
Sure.
So you say, is it doable? Is it achievable? And then you kind of have to go through the mental exercise. Okay, what are the compelling reasons that this should happen?
Mm-hmm.
Then you have to sit down and say, like, okay, who would be opposed to what is being proposed? What would their arguments would be? How would you counter their arguments? Then you have to sit down and say, okay, who is it that would, might be interested and might be passionate about sponsoring something like this? Who are my allies?
Sure.
And who do I need to talk to, and what do I need to do?
Right.
So it's a process where you have to gain a lot of information. But the thing that I've also figured out, Bobby,
Mm-hmm.
is that I know a little bit about a few things, but the people that I deal with are experts in that which they do.
Right.
So what I have to do is I have to figure out whether or not that person who has approached me, whether or not she or he would be a presentable and would be a good spokesperson, or if I need to find someone else. And that's sometimes kind of hard to tell somebody that they maybe aren't the right face or the right person or the right voice.
Sure.
But then what we do is, it's not like I am articulating what they're doing, but we refine their arguments.
Mm-hmm.
And then what we do is we guide them through a process of meeting and talking with people. And what you kind of do is kind of like prepping, witness.
Mm-hmm.
You kind of prep them about what they need to say and how they should say it. And then, if all of a sudden there's certain pieces of information that they're omitting, or all of a sudden, you feel it's kind of necessary, you kind of butt in and kind of say what you need to say. But it's,
Okay.
in some ways, it's like a lot like trial prep.
Right. I mean, how long does that process? I mean, it sounds like it's a very long process to be able to get to just not only gather the information, but to be able to come up with that prep and everything else. I mean, it sounds like it's quite an ordeal.
Well, the thing of it is, kind of like you and others. I mean, I'm competitive. I don't like to lose.
Sure.
And if I'm going to do something, I want to talk to people. But you also, get your bill drafted, you get it into the system so the bureaucracy doesn't kill you.
Right. Sounds like it's a lot. Sounds like it's a lot of work. I mean, what's the fun part that you enjoy most about going through and kind of creating all that process? I mean, is it just the competitive of you want to be so prepared that you've kind of thought about all the different possibilities or outcomes and you're ready for whatever that may be? Is that what it does for you?
Well,
is it what it is for you?
Well, there's a lot of thrills,
Uh-huh.
and first and foremost, it's the thrill of closing the deal or getting the deal to
Right.
And then what it is you want to anticipate as many problems as possible so you're not surprised.
Mm-hmm.
And obviously there are surprises, but in the end, you know whether you're going to win or lose, because
Right.
it all comes down to, there's a simple rule in Utah. It's called the rule of 15-38-1. You have to get 15 votes in the Senate, you have to get 38 votes in the House, and you have to get the governor either go along or not sign or agree not to at least veto a bill.
Right.
So it's pretty simple math. You know what I'm saying?
15-38-1.
Yeah.
So, what are some of the unique qualities that you would say that you have? I mean, just from what we've chatted about so far, I mean, it seems like you're able to absorb just a ton of information and also, be cognizant of kind of what's going on around you for a certain situation, to be able to kind of read people and stuff like that.
So probably one of the best legislators I ever dealt with was a guy named Mike Demetrius from Price, Utah. He was in the legislature for 40 years.
40 years, wow.
Yeah, second longest serving member, and he was really good. But Mike knew how to read people, and one day he looked at me and he goes, Doug, you've played a lot of cards, haven't you? I said, yeah, but why do you say that? And he said, because you know how to read people. And part of it is what you have to do is you have to predict human behavior.
Mm-hmm.
And, like, okay, somebody BSing me or somebody really, playing me along or, will or won't they do this? And, I'm saying, so part of it is, it's not only doing the situational analysis, but, people being bombarded with so many issues, for 85, 90% of the people. And then what you do is you spend a lot of time with a small handful of people so that they are totally prepped. So that when a bill comes to a committee or goes on the floor, that when people start raising questions, they're capable of answering those questions. In the old days, when I first started, they used to let me go on the floor of the House and Senate, and I could stand by the bill sponsor when they were.
So what are some of those like most exciting moments of prep? I mean, is it the win at the end?
Oh, heck yes.
When it comes to you, are you a person who would love to win or hate to lose?
Ooh, that, Bobby, is a really good question. I am a terrible loser, and I love to win, and I'm competitive as can be, and I don't think you know anything about being competitive. Ho ho. But I want to. I'm always willing to put my batting average up against anybody's, and
Sure.
and if my batting average ever slips, then I guess it's time for me to move on.
Right. No, I love that. Love that kind of attitude. Attitude is everything, right, Doug?
Well, I'll tell you, if it isn't everything, it's almost everything. Yep, no question. Yeah.
So, what kind of keeps that enthusiasm and drive for you? As you say, like you start to slip a little bit, and maybe like move on, right? I mean, you've been in the game for such a while. I mean, I know what you were kind of extremely influential in overseeing the 150th anniversary of the Transcontinental Railroad that they celebrated last summer, right?
Yeah, boy, and what a fun experience. Okay.
There you go. Yeah.
Okay, yep. Well, you always have to find things that are interesting and challenging.
Mm-hmm.
And, I mean, it makes life interesting. But the nice thing about what I do, and I really feel badly for people who have to do the same thing again, day in and day out. But, but always meeting interesting people, new ideas, new issues, new challenges. And, so far it stays fresh.
Right. Now, have you, like, for you personally, did you ever have an issue kind of getting out of your comfort zone? Because, I mean, it seems like from what we've talked about so far, I mean, you're definitely not afraid to go out and take some of those risks and kind of go out and experience those kind of life experiences that you get along the way, right? Going to DC, I mean, that's got to be a pretty big transition for someone that's just like small town
18 years old. I mean, it was getting thrown into a totally different world. But but what is life all about? It's about meeting new people and having new experiences.
Sure.
And as you probably know, I mean, traveled the world, been to over 140 countries. But to me, it's always what's the next adventure, whether it's adventure in life, whether it's an adventure in your profession or whatever the case may be.
So just your attitude towards that is just kind of being open and wanting to get those new experiences and those.
Yeah.
And that's, I mean, 140 countries, that's crazy. There
are 186 countries that are recognized and 10 in dispute. Bobby, I tell you, I'd go to every one of them, and I think your friend of mine, Brad Call, would too. And Doug Rand.
Right.
If they were safe, dude, I'd go to every one of them.
Every one of them. So 140 countries. So what are some of the favorites? What are some of those crazy life experiences? I mean, I got to hear some of the.
Well, I mean, like, who other than Brad Call and Doug Foxley would go to the North Pole, and fly into a Russian military camp and stay in in an ice hut and go into the North Pole. But really, some of the most fun experiences have been those where you're kind of off the grid.
Right.
Whether it's going to crazy places in Guyana or going swimming off the coast of Antarctica or having the thrill of, summiting Mount Kilimanjaro or whatever the case might be. I mean, it's not your traditional Disneyland type experience. Look, and
Yeah.
I have nothing against Disneyland, but in some ways it's doing things that are different and unique.
Right. How much does that change your perspective on life? Like, as you talk about, you've been to all those places. I mean, does that help put things in perspective, or does that kind of keep that drive going for you and just that want for more?
Well, you visit various countries that you think, are going to be oppressive and this and that and the other.
Mm-hmm.
And, going into Cuba before Cuba was open, or going like to Bolivia or Colombia or the case may be. And what you find out is, countries' leaders
Mm-hmm.
may be oppressive, they may be authoritarian, but most people are really good, decent people. And they care about themselves, they care about their children, their grandchildren, they want them to have a good life, a better life than they've had. And what you find out is, in the end, whether you're in Greenland or the former Soviet Union or Uzbekistan or wherever the case you go, is pretty much we all kind of have the same interest. And that is, it's the love of family. It's wanting your family to have, more experiences and opportunities and for them to have a better life. And the problem is in some ways you just wish governments would get out of their way,
Right.
so that people wouldn't have to, live under these oppressive regimes, and that they could be free to do whatever they want to do.
Right. So what are some of those favorite countries that you've tried? Like, what are some that I need to absolutely check off the list?
Well,
You have my wheels turning. 140. I mean, I don't know if I can hit that many.
I think you would love Mongolia.
Okay.
And in Mongolia during the summer, they have a Naughton festival. It's where they ride horses and they do all sorts of crazy things.
Mm-hmm.
But for you, an adventurer, I mean, the places you go, like Nepal and or Bhutan or other places like that. I mean, those are the places that I think would intrigue you.
Right.
And yeah, but I look at various countries, and in some ways, you go to a country and all of a sudden, if you come away pleasantly surprised, you go like, wow, I had no idea.
Yeah.
Like, for instance, Morocco, one of the most intriguing places I've been. I mean, I look at Namibia and other places, and I don't know. It's always the sense of the new adventure, Anyway, it's fun.
Yeah. Have you been to every state? Have you hit everyone here?
I've been to every state, and
Every
this
state.
year I was going to fulfill my goal of visiting every province in Canada,
Okay.
but COVID kind of got in my way. Been to every country in South America, Central America, North America. Been to all of the island nations of the Caribbean.
Wow.
Been to every country in Europe. Kind of had a goal that I was going to, I was going to visit every island nation in the Indian Ocean,
Mm-hmm.
but a year ago last Christmas, all of a sudden, the bubonic plague broke out in Madagascar. So
Wow.
it kind of threw that off. But then I had hoped next year, that I would visit every island nation in the Pacific Ocean. But that was been put off for a year or two. So anyway.
So that love to travel, I mean, did that really come from when you're 18, going to DC, getting these new experiences and stuff like that? Like, wow, I kind of want to get more of this. I want to get exposed to what else the world has to offer.
Really what it was is as a young man, we used to have an atlas that used to be on the top shelf in the entry hall closet, and I'd get a stool and pull it down and look at maps, and I don't know, I always just dreamed about visiting places, and boy, I never thought I'd be lucky enough to see or do what I've done.
Yeah,
But so it was really Bobby, as a young man looking at maps.
Mm-hmm. Getting some of those. So what's the airline of choice? What's the way to go?
Oh,
Delta. It's Delta for me.
well, can I tell you, the airline of choice if it were still around would be Pan Am.
Pan Am?
Because, yeah, I mean, it flew everywhere, or British Airways.
Mhm.
But look, you live in Salt Lake City, thank heavens we have a Delta hub.
Oh yeah.
And, over 3 million miles on Delta. And thank you, Delta, for, taking me a whole bunch of places that, that I've wanted to go, and maybe some I shouldn't have gone to.
Yeah, no, Delta definitely was. I've always enjoyed my experiences with them. So they have a loyal customer, I should say.
Well, look. I think Utah, we're really lucky because, number one, we have skiing. Something that you're passionate about. That which brought your dad and your parents out to Utah from New York. But really, when you think that Larry Lee, the former president of Western Airlines, took the gamble and moved Western's hub from LA to Salt Lake City, and then the fact that Western was acquired by Delta, I mean, otherwise, I mean, it would be like Albuquerque or Boise or Reno or something else. But
Yeah.
to have that Delta hub here, and then literally to have the new expanded Salt Lake International Airport here, going to start, adding more flights, to, abroad, especially to Asia and other places. I mean,
Yep.
we're so lucky we live where we live.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, it's crazy. I mean, your perspective, I'm just curious, your perspective on the amount of growth that's just happening here. I mean, every day, every year, it just seems to be ever changing. I'm sure the political landscape for you, since you've kind of gotten into it to now, just has to be astronomically different.
Well, yeah, because I mean, what's happened, Bobby, is we've moved from really a communal society to a mass society.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, there was a time where most communities, I mean, they kind of had their own hierarchy and political structure, and they would elect representatives to kind of go to Salt Lake to represent their interests. But now with the reapportionment cases and everything else, I mean, I mean, how many people do you really know? Do you know what I'm saying? And when you got legislative district, 60,000 people, Senate district over 140,000. I mean, life has become far more impersonal in the state of Utah.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, it definitely seems that way. I mean, it seems like there's a lot of big ticket issues and items. I know one of my good friends is definitely he's just getting his toes wet in the lobbying world and protect our winners. I know he's been doing some stuff with them and try to get some of those things going. I mean, it seems like there's a lot of big ticket issues, especially everything that's going down with Escalante down south and a lot of the ski mountains. I mean, there's definitely a lot of issues that are building here in the state, to say the least.
Well, look, I mean, a lot of people look at the Great Salt Lake, and you probably ought to put signs at Salt Lake International Airport when you enter from Nevada or Evanston, Wyoming, to say visit but don't swim in it. But look, we need to protect the Great Salt Lake, mm-hmm. And if I owned a ski resort, which I'm not lucky enough to own, but but the lake effect and what happens, I mean, and also the environmental degradation that would happen if all of a sudden the lake continues to dry up. You look at the RLC and other places. I mean, we've got some issues. Yep. You've got a whole bunch of people in rural Utah. Their lives are difficult, and and then you've got a whole bunch of people from the Wasatch Front and from the world that want to come and recreate. You've got a whole bunch of public lands, and yep. Those issues are going to continue to be divisive, but over time, they're going to change because the overwhelming majority of people live in the Wasatch Front.
Yep.
And things will change. I mean, I look at what happens in the upcoming presidential election.
Right.
If all of a sudden Joe Biden is elected president, I would be amazed if all of a sudden the original borders of, Grand Staircase, Susquehanna expanded.
Yep.
On and on and on and on. And, we'll continue to have, the friction between, those who, want kind of life as they view it and those who want things different.
Yeah. I mean, how much has that changed in the last few years? Just the gap now is so wide and it's crazy.
Yeah. One day, Ed Abbey shows up for dinner. And Ed writes the Monkey Wrench Game on and on and on. And here was the character who was Bishop Anderson in his book, but you had two guys that had dinner together regularly and drank coffee together, this and that and the other, and they agreed to disagree. The problem today is I just think that these competing voices are shouting, at others, but people aren't listening. And I don't know, somewhere along the line, dialogue has to occur and take place.
Right. I mean, what do you think's going to be the main way to make that happen? I mean, if everyone's just shouting at each other, it seems like they don't really want to actually sit down and have a cup of coffee and be able to discuss it.
Well, look, you look at the growth projections in Utah, and the state will almost double in size, and most of that growth will be along the Wasatch Front. And I think that will change the dynamic of politics as we know it, at least on the rural versus urban issues, because people want to move here for one reason, and they want to move here to recreate, whether it's, in the Alpine Meadows or whether it's in the Red Rock Desert. And the other thing is I think people, even though they don't want to admit it, they like public lands, because all of a sudden, if you don't have the public lands, and what you've seen a whole bunch of major entities and corporations come in and buy ranches and this and that and the other, and they basically shut off access to all but a handful of people. So I mean you look back to President Ronald Reagan and others, Sagebrush Rebellion, and let's turn this ground over to the states and local communities and sell it on and on and on. That's never going to happen. So somewhere along the way, we've got to figure out how we can all peacefully coexist. What really is wilderness, or what isn't, and what areas should be developed and shouldn't be developed. That's gonna take a lot of patience, and it's going to require leadership.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's crazy. Silicon Slopes and the growth. I mean, just since I've been here in Park City, Heber, Salt Lake, I mean, so much has changed just in the last 10 years, let alone since the Olympics. I mean, after the Olympics, it really started to take off. It's crazy, especially if we decide to we get the bid, and I think 2030 is what they're shooting for the Winter Olympics.
Yeah. Look, it's not if we get the bid; it's when we get the bid.
That's true. Definitely true. So, but I mean, and then I just imagine, with the airport growing and all that. I mean, we're going to have more and more people coming in, which I guess could be is a good problem to have, that people love the state, but it definitely means there's a lot of changes along the way, right?
Well, it's kind of like somebody was telling me about a sign, in Montana: "Come visit, but don't stay."
Exactly. That's a good one.
If you stay, leave your values, where
exactly
where you came from. Yeah.
Well, so I mean, looking back, because nobody bats 1,000. You do have those losses kind of along the way, and what kind of helps you get through some of those failures? Because I feel like as we've discussed, you're a very competitive guy. You like to win, don't like to lose. But what do you take away from some of those losses that kind of create that perseverance that have really helped you to reach greater success?
Well, I think you've learned this, as a very young man, but you learn more from your losses than you learn from your victories. because you always go back and you analyze, what if I had done X? I should have anticipated Y. How could have I changed the result? And so it makes you better.
Yeah.
And, the problem is, there's the old political, axiom, what have you done for me lately?
Mm-hmm.
You're only as good as your last deal. You can't lose too many, but but when you do lose, you better learn, or you're gonna lose a lot more.
Right. So definitely learn from those mistakes and kind of figure out keeping that head down and working forward.
Yeah. Yeah.
Is it pretty easy for you to get over a loss? Like you kind of stew on it for a few days to get your takeaways, and then okay, this is what I'm gonna take away from this. And
generally, that's what happens. And
okay.
But then every now and then, all of a sudden, something will dawn on you, like, oh, but yeah. But look, I don't know. I don't know. Who told me this, but it was pretty good advice. Look back but never stare.
Look back but never stare. I like that.
Yeah, yeah. And because look, the past is the past. You've got the present and the future, and so learn from the past, but move on.
Right. You got to move on. You got to be able to move quickly, for sure. So people that kind of want to get into politics or pass some legislation and become a lobbyist. I mean, what are some words of wisdom you would have for them, or kind of some advice that would help them moving forward?
Well, look. I think thank heavens you have places like the Hinckley Institute of Politics at the University of Utah and others. You've got internships. It used to be I used to hire kind of the top pre-law students at the University of Utah and Utah State University, to work for me.
Mm-hmm.
Then all of a sudden, I started hiring people who had worked, as a legislative intern, because they kind of knew the process, especially those involved in leadership. So get involved. Get involved in a campaign. Learn to meet people, because part of it is knowledge, is process, and it's knowing people and kind of knowing who makes what decisions and how you can influence them.
Right. Makes a lot of sense. I mean, how difficult is it because I feel like there's especially nowadays that culture of always wanting to be right, and always, especially with my generation, it's always you say one wrong thing or it goes out on Twitter, then you're eating those words for breakfast and you're getting shamed and everything else. So I mean, how can you learn without kind of making those mistakes, right? You kind of have to have those along the way. You have to have a little bit of missteps, right?
Sure. You have to have missteps, but if you make a mistake, admit it,
mm-hmm.
and apologize, and apologize quickly.
Yeah. Be on the topic quickly.
Yeah. Yeah. Don't let it fester.
Don't let it fester. So, books that I need to make sure I get, that I need to read. What are some new ones that you would recommend? That if you get a top 10, top 5, you don't have to give me just one. You can give me a few.
Well, I have to tell you, I thought Catch and Kill by Ronan Farrow was great. Ronan Farrow, was at NBC. He was on to the whole, Harvey Weinstein sexual harassment issues.
Okay.
NBC wouldn't let him do it. I finally wrote an article in the New Yorker, but very, 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 very well done. I love the book Bad Blood. It's about about the whole Theranos misadventure. Well done. I just finished a book recently. It was called From Russia with Blood. It was about how it was really about how Putin and the Russian KGB, how they started basically killing off all these wealthy oligarchs in Britain. a book that was kind of a slog, but I'm glad that I really read.
Mm-hmm.
It's by David Berry Jr. It's called, The Great Influenza. And it's kind of the magnum opus of really the Spanish flu.
I read that. It's a great book.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. A great book. And, I mean, first of all, I had no idea about scientific medicine and, really, whether it was the Rockefeller Institute, Johns Hopkins, and others. But, but how relevant is that book and with what we're dealing with today? So anyway.
Yeah, no, it's super, super on the point, and it's interesting, like people, and I think it's definitely one of the issues with some of our younger generation, and definitely a lot of my friends don't know their history that well, right? And I feel like we lose it more and more with each generation. But I mean, we've had to wear masks in the past during the Great Influenza. I mean, masks were, it was one of those things that this is not the first time we've had to deal with this.
Yeah. So, what's fascinating is the other day, I was up fishing with Dr. Po Chang, and he's originally from Taiwan, was a professor at the University of Utah. And he goes, Doug, in Taiwan, there's 33 million people. Do you know how many, cases of COVID-19 we've had? And I go, like, I don't know. And he goes, like 600. They've had like 7 deaths and this and that, and the only 2 active cases. And so really, people are doing it right, people are doing it wrong. But I think there are lessons to be learned from history. And that's why I think that David Berry book is just, even though it takes a while to slog through, it's relevant. And I'm glad you've read it. And I would hope many, or if not most of your peers, will also read it. Because it's well worth it.
Any books for success, or that you found quite poignant and have helped you during your career?
Boy, that's a good question. I think some of the stuff that Clayton Christensen has done has been really good.
Clayton Christensen?
Yeah, Clayton recently passed away. He actually had Salt Lake roots, but he was at Harvard Business School.
Okay.
And wrote some really good stuff. The whole issue of ethics is fascinating, Bobby, and it's interesting how ethics has kind of been something that's now kind of part of what's been integrated into business schools, on and on and on.
Mm-hmm.
But the real question is, where do you learn ethics? And and all of a sudden you're a 22 or 23-year-old kid at the University of Utah or Westminster or whatever the case may be. All of a sudden, can you learn ethics? But I don't know. I'll have to think about that and get back with you on that question.
Sure.
I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I'm not as prepared on that one as I should be.
No, totally fine. Totally fine. So, are you more of a fiction or nonfiction?
I don't read very much fiction.
Yeah.
I like good fiction, but to me, life is reality.
Right.
And whether it's that which is going on in the world, or whether it's been significant people who have shaped the world for good or bad,
mm-hmm.
or historical events as certain people interpret them. To me, I'm far more drawn to that. I love good writing.
Sure.
I love fiction, but it's probably 10 to 15% of what I read. But if it's really good fiction, send it my way.
Gotcha. Yeah, I don't really read any fiction either. I'm pretty much nonfiction. I love a lot of biographies. I'm always a big biography, especially with competing and everything else. I really enjoyed a lot of tennis biographies. And then also some wrestling was always really good because, kind of those individual sports, skiing's so unique in that it's you against the hill and everything else. So I was really thought, even with tennis and wrestling, I mean, it's an individual sport, but you still have someone kind of across the way, right? But they're definitely some good parallels you can kind of take away there. I actually just finished a book, audio book that Doug Wren had recommended when he was on the show, and that was Moonwalking with Einstein.
Oh yeah,
Joshua 4. I
yeah,
thought that
yeah.
was a super interesting takeaway. I'm trying to work on my memory palace. So
Well, yeah, I've actually just got a new biography of Yogi Berra, and I have to tell you, I'm excited to pick that one up.
Yogi Berra, awesome,
Yeah,
awesome,
yeah.
awesome. So for people kind of out there, what would be some good takeaways, success wise, that have really you've ingrained in yourself that you think have really helped lead a successful and fulfilled and just kind of great life that you've had so far?
Well, great question, and I think part of it is be willing to experiment. If there's something that you don't like or you can't see yourself doing, then find something else. I mean, the average person works over 80,000 years in their lifetime. 80,000 hours
Hours, yeah.
in their lifetime. It may seem like 80,000 years. Yeah. So you better find something you like, but also, there are some things that probably should be hobbies or avocations where you really can't make a living. But, try to find something that matches up to you, to your skill set and your passion. And, I hope people can find it. And the other thing is always invest in yourself. I mean, I have a whole bunch of degrees behind my name. And I think that it's always important to learn and continue to learn. And I think investing in education is important. So I don't know. Those are some of my takeaways.
Gotcha. No, that's great. I really those are good. Got those written down. I'm gonna try to continue to be passionate. Continue my passion.
Oh, I think you will die passionate, Bobby.
I think so. I gotta find something to get into politically, though. I gotta find a good cause to get behind, because I have not done.
You know what? Just keep your eyes open and
Eyes
let
open,
it find
okay.
let it find you, and
I'll let
which
it
it
find me.
will.
Okay,
Yeah.
I'm sure it will.
Yeah.
Well, Mr. Foxley, thank you so much for taking the time. It's been a lot of fun.
Oh,
And
listen,
I really
really
appreciate it.
it's fun being with you. Thanks for having me on. Talk to you soon.
Talk to you soon.
See you,
All right.
buddy. Thanks. Bye.
Bye.
Ladies and gentlemen, I hope you enjoyed today's episode. Thanks a lot for listening in. I really appreciate it. Please make sure to take the time to like, share, and subscribe our show. And also you can follow along on Instagram. Thanks.